this is Anna and welcome to my channel BB3AV, and today I'd like to do one of my favorite videos to watch with other people. I'm going to talk about the 10 books I have really enjoyed this year. Not necessarily the best literary books to read. One of them will be a non-fiction book. Not all of them I have given 5 stars. So it's a bit of a mix. However, despite the fact that some of those books were read really early in the year, I still think about them. And I think, to me personally, this is the way the books should be thought about. If the book is really good, this is the book which is going to stay with you in some capacity. The books are going to be in a completely random list. It's not like one is the best and the rest are somehow worse. So there's going to be no order from 10 to 1. Just the 10 books I really enjoyed. Another disclaimer is that I don't have all of them in a paper version, because some of them were written in Russian and I haven't purchased the paper version, and the Russian book has not even been translated into English, but I'm going to talk about them. So I'm going to start with my favorite publisher, the Persephone books. There are 2 Persephone books which are on the list today. I'm going to start with Monica Dickens and her book Mariana. It comes in this amazing Persephone and paper. Look at that. I've talked about Persephone books before, so I'm not going to dwell on it. A lot of people have read it. There are 2 ways they publish these books, because this is such a classic for the publisher. They also have a version of it with the girl on the cover, but I went for the traditional one because I would like to collect all of the Persephone books and I would like them to all look the same. It's written by Monica Dickens, who is a granddaughter of Charles Dickens, and her prose is really captivating. It has a very similar pace to her grandfather. It's quite slow. It's a story about finding out who you are. It's a story about growth and adolescence, becoming a person in your own right. It follows the life of the girl living in London and how she progresses through life. It's a slow, comfortable read. I gave it 5 stars and I have taken my time reading it. So unfortunately, this particular one is not translated in many languages. Honestly, I think that Monica Dickens should be translated into more languages, because I really like her as an author. I since went a bit of a binge and I purchased some old Penguin books written by her, Penguin edition ones, which I'm planning to read in 2017. Book number 2 is also a Persephone edition. This is number 3 in the Persephone, and this is Dorothy Whipple's Someone at a Distance. I absolutely love this book. For those of you who have been watching my channel, when I was talking about my cross stitch, I have mentioned this book. I did not expect that much pleasure out of this book. It talks about a disillusion of a happy marriage or normal, comfortable marriage in the mid-20th century in rural England. How easy it is to lose what you used to and how much you regret it afterwards. So it's a story about regrets and life. It's a very current book. I think, again, it should be translated into more languages. I absolutely love the prose of Dorothy Whipple. I am planning to read more of her books. I have purchased 3 more books by her, published by the Persephone, and that is on my list for 2017. Book number 3 is the book I have very recently finished. It has taken me forever, and that's Kazuo Ishiguro, The Remains of the Day. I will talk more about this book when I talk about my December reads. I again give this one 5 stars. It's a slow read. I tend to like slow reads. I think that's my thing. But it's really thoughtful and it makes you reach your own conclusions, which is what I like. I don't like the author to tell me what I need to be feeling and what I need to be thinking. I like to form my own conclusions, and this book lets you do it in a very polite way, shall I say. It's very British in the way it's written. Really British. It's a beautiful short novel, and there's no doubt that it's a worthy recipient of the When Booker Prize. It won it in 1989. Beautiful novel. I have not read anything else by the Kazuo Ishiguro, and I will be. It was a very nice encounter. The next book, book number 4, is a tiny little novel. I actually still have all of my thumbnails attached to it. Usually I take them off. And this is Jane Reese's White Sargassy. I have read this book on recommendation from Alicia. I love her channel. I do really like Jane Eyre. I've read it multiple times, and I always felt that the story of Antoinette, the wife of Mr. Rochester, his first wife, the one who lived in the attic and was mad and eventually committed suicide, is not fully explained. She's like a character there for no particular purpose. This book explores her point of view, and to be honest, after I've read this book, I really hated Mr. Rochester. Like, I really hated him to the point that I had to go and reread Jane Eyre again. For such a small volume, it really holds a punch. I did not give this book 5 stars. I do not think everyone would like it. However, I do agree that this is a contemporary modern classic, and I do believe that this book should be read by more people, and it should be read by people who read Jane Eyre. I think the two of them absolutely complement each other, and this should be recognized more. This is book number 5, and this is Wash by Margaret Winkle. I believe this is still her only novel. She's a film director, screenwriter, as well as a novelist, and this book won the Best Book of the Year award from the Wall Street Journal in 2013. However, unfortunately, not that many people talk about this book, and I think it's such a shame. Personally, I found out about it from the Goodreads because one of the women who I follow and have been following for several years now read it, gave it 5 stars. I thought it was absolutely amazing. I have picked up the electronic copy and have subsequently purchased the paper one because I think the novel is absolutely beautiful. I have cried several times while reading this book. That has been back in December, and I still come back to this book months later. It's been 12 months almost, and I come back to it and come back to it and come back to it. It's such a shame that not that many people read it. What the novel is about, it's about human dignity and how you preserve your dignity in a very difficult situation. So it follows the life of a boy born into slavery. His mother was transferred on the boat from Africa, turned into slavery in the United States. He was born a slave, and he had managed to form a very unique relationship with his master. They had a mutual respect. And the way the book is written, it doesn't blame anyone. It doesn't paint the world as black and white, that this is the poor slave and his owner is absolutely horrible. No, it actually shows that both men are human. Both men have difficult parts of their life which turn them into sometimes a horrible human being, but they get through it. And it ends with his death, so you follow his entire life from birth to death. The life in slavery and how he tried as much as possible to carve a niche in that horrible world when he didn't have to feel as a slave. He still wanted to feel as a free man. As I've said, I have cried reading this book, and I think I might reread it again in 2017. Absolutely beautiful. The next book on the list is Boris Pasternak, his Dr. Zhivago. I have it in the Russian language in one of my favorite editions. I absolutely love those editions. They have a nice cloth back underneath, and they do come in a paper cover on the top, the glossy paper. You might argue that I like this book so much because I've recently read it and it's still fresh in my mind. However, I do think this is one of the best works of fiction I have read in a long time, if not in my life. And I did not expect to like it as much. I knew it was a classic. I knew a lot of people liked it. I remember my biology teacher in England, in my boarding school, kept telling me how much he enjoyed the movie. I have never seen the movie of Omar Sharif, and to be honest, I don't think I will, because if you read the book, you will realize that physically at least, he bears no resemblance to the character. The character was blonde and not particularly attractive, and that was the whole point, that he was created as a normal human, an average Joe, not this strikingly beautiful, charismatic doctor. So I've watched the trailer now of the movie, and to me, honestly, it loses the point. I know a lot of you will disagree with me because you grew up watching that movie. I do agree with the fact that this book should be read in the winter. does take place in winter months for the majority, but there are some scenes which are written in a boiling summer heat. So whenever you pick it up, it's worth it. I will talk more about this beautiful piece of fiction when I talk about what I've read in December 2016, this month. I have cried non-stop for the last 120 pages, to the point that my husband had to take the book away, saying that you're absolutely masochistic. You have to get to work tomorrow at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's 1:30 at night. Surely you should be going to bed. And I just couldn't stop. And what made it so special for me is, in the end of the book, there are poems written by Dr. Zhivago. He was writing those poems throughout the actual book, and they're all printed in the end of the volume. So once you finish the book, you go back to those novels and you get to relive all of the events again. And the poetry is really poignant, really poignant. To be honest, I have, in my reader's journal, I have copied some of the words. There are so many allegories used. There is a lot of connections of this book going back and referring you to War and Peace. I clearly appreciated Tolstoy when he was writing his novel. And it's done with love and humility, love for his country and regret for the changes it's undergoing. And again, you don't have the clear black and white in this book. You don't have a single character who is just this amazing, never ever committing anything wrong individual. Everyone in this book is imperfect. Every single character in this book is real. And I think that if you are not versed in the Russian literature, if you're thinking what it is you should be picking up next year for your Russian TBR, please read Dr. Zhivago, because you will not be disappointed. Finally, this is the last paper version book on this list. This is the only non-fiction book on this list. And this is the Mammoth Tome, written by Andrew Solomon. This won the 2014 Wellcome Book Prize, which is the book prize given to the works of non-fiction science writing by the Wellcome Trust charity, which is one of the largest charities here in the United Kingdom. They do sponsor a lot of work. For instance, they have sponsored the Human Genome Project. And despite the fact that this book is really big, it's a massive volume, and it has taken me practically the good portion of my October, I have since recommended it to some of my students, because this book is divided into sections, and each section has taken him years and years to collect information for. One section, for instance, is devoted to the study of being gay and how do you interact within your family, how do you relate to a child if you are straight as parents and you find to have a gay child an anathema. How does society treat these children, and which is quite poignant because Andrew Solomon openly says in the first chapter that he was gay. He was also a Jew. Having both of those things were not really a recipe for success, and how his parents coped with it. There's a big chapter which deals with issue of death culture in the United States and other countries, and how children of deaf parents who can hear sometimes have a choice, a very uncomfortable choice to make. Which language do they choose? Do they stay in the comfort of the family, or do they actually carve a new path where they can use the hearing? It talks about dwarfism, how society looks at dwarfism. The big section looks at the prodigious children, particularly at the young musicians, because Andrew Solomon openly says straight away in the beginning that he doesn't really understand chess as much, so he's not going to look at it. He's not going to look at mathematical geniuses. He's going to look at really gifted young musicians. And he openly describes issues such as that for some parents it is as difficult as having a child with a mental illness. Because if your child is that gifted, something has to give. You have to adjust your lifestyle. Your other children might suffer. A lot of marriages don't survive this strain. It talks about children with autism in some very painful detail. It talks about schizophrenia. It all divided into separate chapters. I have some students I teach who are gay and whose family are not really accepting or they're too scared to come out, and I don't think it's my right to tell them what to do. But I can see that they're trying to find out how to lead the life. And I have recommended this book to two of them who I thought could deal with the issue, who were old enough, they were over 16, and I felt that they could actually get something really valuable. This book has not been translated in Russian, unfortunately, which is really sad, because I think Russian society, with a lot of those latent stigmas and relationship towards gay people and people with disabilities, a lot of people are still not willing to accept that those people are part of our life. And reading this book, written in a very approachable way, the book is really, really humble. It's written in a humble way by a person who sympathizes with the people he describes, but at the same time he is not really biased. Like you can feel his pain and his own journey through his own life, because he has used his example in this book as well. I'm really, really glad that I have read this book, and I will be reading parts of it later, I'm sure, many, many, many more times. Right, the last books on this list I do not have as a physical paper version yet. One of them is Narine Abgaryan and her book Manyunya, which has never been translated into English, and it's such a shame. This book should be translated into English. It's absolutely hilarious. It's partly autobiographical. So Narine Abgaryan she's a Russian author. She lives and writes in Russian now, in Russian language, but she's of Armenian heritage. So she grew up in Armenia, in a tiny town, not even in the capital of Armenia, Yerevan. She grew up in a tiny village. So she tells about her childhood and the series of books, and she talks about her best friend, about her three sisters, how they lived as a big family. This was, no doubt, hands down, the funniest book I have read this year. I mean, there are parts of this book I was crying because I was laughing. Like, on the bus, there's this scene in this book right in the beginning that I had to leave the bus and sit on the bus stop because it was just so funny. Like, I had tears running down my face. I love that book so much. I have recommended to my mom. My mom has now read it. All of her friends have now read it. They all really liked it, but it has not been translated. People, you should be translated Narine Abgaryan into English, because she is fantastic. She's one of those really current Russian authors who I think will appeal to the wider audience. So yeah, I have not had a chance to purchase this book on paper, which I will do when I go to Russia in February to see my family. I will actually pop into the bookshop and purchase. There are 3 books in a series. I've only read 1. I'm not going to read all of them. I will save 1 a year because they're just so good. Another book I have read this year, actually in December, and I will talk about it more in the books I've read. I have given it 4 stars, but I still think it was one of the best books I have read, and that's the debut novel by Chigozie Bioma, which is not Norwegian, Nigerian author. And the book was shortlisted last year for the Man Booker Prize. It's called The Fisherman. And it follows the story of 4 brothers through their childhood, through early years in the childhood in the 1990s, in a distant part of Nigeria in the south. And it does not well end, shall we say, for the vast majority of the brothers involved. To the point then only 2 of them survive, and they do survived with a lot of baggage. I have read the book in pretty much one sitting. I could not put it down, even though it is written with some of the Nigerian, I know in Nigeria they have, I think, 3 main languages a part of English, based on the religion and the tribes, so the tribal languages, which are really respectfully described in the book. And it's just so nice the way he kept switching the tone and the mood of the conversation by just changing the language. So he was going like, oh yeah, now my parents gonna speak in English with me, and that means so and so, and now they're gonna speak in their mother tongue to me, and that implies completely different scenes straight away. It's completely different temperature in the room. I am really pleasantly surprised for a debut novel. Honestly, it's amazing. I really want to read more Nigerian literature now. I want to read more African literature now, but this was just such a pleasure, and I want to buy it in the paper version. It's not a happy book. I'm gonna forewarn you if you have not read it. It's not a happy book. There's some really sad parts in it, like really, really sad parts. So if you're a parent of young children, you probably might struggle with reading it. But I think it's worth the difficulty you experience going through it. It will make you a better person. And that leaves me with the last book on the list, and that's The Muse by J.C. Barton. The book published earlier this year, the book which I have read. I didn't plan to read it at all. I've read it completely on a whim because I hated the miniseries so much. And I've talked about how much I hated that book when I talked about the biggest disappointments of the year. So I thought, like, okay, everyone kept telling me that the miniseries was wonderful. I really hated it. I'd like to give that author a second chance just to see. Oh my god, I'm so glad I did, because The Muse is so much better. It's a much, much better book, to the point where I felt that it was written by a completely different writer. It follows the life of two women, effectively. Three women, really. Three women. One of them in two different times. The setting set in Spain was my favorite part. I prefer to the setting in London. It's set in two countries, in two different time periods. And the setting set in Spain, you can taste Spain. You can taste the temperature, you can taste the smell, you can taste the flavors of the food. And it follows the life of the artist and the work of art. It's a tragic story. It is a tragic story. And if I tell you more, I think I will just spoil the book. But the language used is beautiful. The background, the way she describes background, is just so vivid. I could feel the smells of the oil paints when I was reading this book. I could feel the smell of a soil, the smell of the sea, the smell of the morning. I could feel the morning fog on my skin when I was reading it. It's just so rich. The images she creates, they're just beautiful. And I would never have believed that this book was written by the same woman. So if you read The Miniaturist and you were as disappointed as I was, please do not go avoiding The Muse. I think it will pleasantly surprise you. So that's it for the 10 books I have really enjoyed this year. There are many more. I have managed to surprisingly read over 140 books, which I did not plan on reading. I thought 100 was super ambitious for me, but I somehow managed to read more than 140. And next time I see you, I will talk to you about my plans for 2017. Thank you, bye.